Hello, everyone. It's Steve with Aptera Owners Club.
Hello, everyone. It's the Aussie Ideas Man. Once again, having a little big Merry Christmas to everyone. It's actually Christmas morning. And before I head for the beach, my wife's still asleep, and I'm going to see if I can just throw this out quickly. I'll probably get interrupted.
This picture is something I've seen multiple times on social media from my friends that are sort of anti-EV or have been duped into thinking that EVs are bad either by their friends or their political persuasion or whatever. But this is something that I see showing up on social media quite a bit. And basically, the implication here is that electric car batteries are are a an item that's going to wear out, and you're going to need to replace it soon. And I think most of them think, oh yeah, after like 8 to 10 years, you're going to have to replace the entire battery. It's going to be essentially the price of the car, and this is why electric EVs are terrible. But that just ignores all reality and facts about the longevity of EV batteries. EV batteries will probably outlast the chassis and every other part of the car.
It doesn't ignore all the facts. If you take in account all of the facts, you'll find that there is a problem with EV batteries.
Okay, so let's look at the information that we have. So there is a study from Recurrent Auto. They looked at all the Model 3 and Model Y batteries over the course of about 6 to 7 years. And this was actually not looking at battery life because we know from test loop that Tesla cars that were fast charged and abused by doing the run from LA to Vegas multiple times a day for many years. I think they had several vehicles with over 300,000 miles on them. They had still had like 85 to 90% of um, their battery capacity.
So here we go. First, he shows all these graphs that show that batteries degrade over time, and then says they're not an indication of battery life. This is the very thing that makes batteries a bad thing. Unfortunately, there's still good things about EVs, and we have to live with it. But if you get a fuel tank in a car, it does outlast the car. The fuel keeps going in and out, just like electrons keep going in and out of a battery, but the fuel tank stays the same. So if you put a gallon of fuel or a litre of fuel, depending on where you live, if you put a certain amount of fuel on the day that you bought it into the car, it will net you X amount of miles. If you put that amount of fuel 20 years later into the car, it will have the potential to net you the same amount of distance because the fuel tank does not degrade the fuel at the slightest, not at the slightest. Now, I will say it doesn't net you the same distance because that depends on how well you have maintained your motor. And if it's a internal combustion engine and it is poorly maintained, you will lose range. But it's the fault of the engine and not the fuel tank itself. This is what anti-EV zealots are claiming. They're saying that the container for the power source is deficient in that it degrades.
Left after putting about 400,000 miles on those vehicles. This was a study looking at how much does fast charging impact the battery life. Now, it's kind of common knowledge or accepted dogma that fast charging is hard on batteries and fast charging degrades battery life. That's because fast charging puts a lot of thermal load on the battery. and that thermal cycling is tough on the battery. So what they did is they looked at vehicles that use frequent fast charging and rare fast charging. And what they've surprisingly found out is that the thermal management, at least on Teslas, is good enough that the fast charging does not seem to make a difference. If you look at those two lines and they track pretty well together. And
So the fast charging doesn't make a difference, but it doesn't matter because the normal, I guess, slow charging still degrades the battery. This graph says that it was at 100% when new, and very rapidly, the first few years, it drops down to 90%. After 90%, the degradation slows quite considerably, but it still degrades. It never stays the same. It is degradation, and this is the whole point. This is what people are saying, and he's trying to prove them wrong. Instantly, we can see they're right.
you can see that most of the degradation happens in the first year to 2 years. So, 365 days would be about here. And so, this is 2 years. So most of the degradation is going to happen in the first 2 years, and you'll have like 92% of your capacity left. After that, it flattens out quite a bit. And after, about 5 to 6 years or 7 years, you still have about 90% of your battery left, and then it levels off.
The additional problem to battery degradation, which he has agreed to instantly at the very beginning of his argument, he's proving that you degrade quickly over the first 2 years. But the big problem with degradation is the matter that you can only, to save making this degradation work, you can only charge, and I'm not talking about fast charging, I'm talking about any charging, you can only charge to 80%. If you charge to more than 80% every time, your degradation is going to be much worse than that. So there's the twin problems. Your battery, which is just a container for your power source, not only degrades under normal circumstances, trying to protect it from degradation, you need to use 80%. So when they say you've lost range through degradation, you've also lost range through not being able to use the top 20% of your battery's containment ability.
Same thing on the Model Y, that's no different. If you look at this study of Tesla Model S's and X's,
I'll add to that the fuel tank in an ICE car. Not only does it keep the same amount of power available to the engine, it allows you to go down to almost 0%. In fact, my experience was with my EV that I got down to the EV telling me I had 10 kilometres of range left and it died completely on me, which meant I had to go on a truck. It had to be put on a truck. I couldn't just get a bottle of fuel and stick it in there. My method was to ring up and order a tow truck to put it on it. It can't even be towed, it has to go on top of the truck. Now, I've had many, many ICE cars over many decades, and when I am told the range is empty, there's about 40 or 50 kilometres left in reserve before it actually stops. And then I can just walk to the nearest service station, get a soft drink bottle of petrol and fill it up and then drive back to the station. It is so much easier. And this is the point. And the cretin has no argument against it.
which obviously they've been around for a longer because they were introduced earlier, and you can see that at 200,000 miles, these vehicles. So you can see how it like drops off initially and then it really flattens off. At 200,000 miles, they have high 80% to low 90% percent of their capacity. And this will likely, and we know that if you extrapolate this out farther to the right to 300 and 400,000 miles, it stays above 80%. So you still have lots of usable range on these batteries after 200, 300, 400,000 miles. And there's very few people that are using their cars for 300, 400,000 miles. There is a guy that's using that.
If you had something like a Toyota Land Cruiser at 200,000 miles and a properly maintained engine, you would have 99% of the power go to the wheels. 99% of what you got on the day you first drove it at 200,000 miles, that's what you'd be getting. And you're not restricted to topping it up to 80%. You can top it up to 100% every time. And you can top it up as fast as the pump will pump it in. There's no limit. Now, at 200,000 miles, if you went to 600,000 miles, which many Land Cruisers will do, you would probably still be at over 90%. I would have to get figures, but way better than any EV battery can provide. And while getting way better than over 90%, you can still fill it to 100%. You can fill the tank completely. You have no restrictions at all. But the good thing about that is if you ever accidentally punctured your fuel tank, you can repair it for a song, or you can completely replace it for a song. It is so inexpensive. There is never a $60,000 fuel tank for an internal combustion engine. It just doesn't exist. It's crazy. I don't think a Rolls-Royce fuel tank would cost that much.
Has a Chevy Volt that has 400,000 miles on it, and he has not noticed any degradation. Now, Chevy Volt is a plug-in hybrid, so not all of the miles will be on the battery. In this case, it was 35% on the battery, which still equals about 150,000 miles on the battery. And the other thing to think about is that the Volt battery is much smaller, so it's being cycled from 0 to 100 every single time that you're going to deplete the entire range of that battery. Give other than the little safety buffers that the manufacturer builds in. So this is the worst case scenario for battery usage. It's being charged up to 100% and drained to.
This isn't the worst case scenario. This is an inappropriate scenario. He uses lies, damn lies, and statistics to his favour, and only the gullible fools who invest in Aptera will fall for this.
Zero multiple times in a plug-in hybrid, and even in this scenario, this Volt is doing very well. No noticeable degradation after 400,000 miles on the vehicle and about 150,000 miles on the battery. And on a much smaller battery, 150,000 miles is like way more cycling, probably equivalent to about 500,000 miles on a full EV battery cycle. And then this is a guy, Andy Sly. He's a pretty well-known Tesla YouTuber, and he's got 135,000 miles on his Model 3. And he still has over 95% of his battery life. So he really babies his battery. So these are average use case scenarios, this and this graph. And in just average everyday use, using fast charging, depleting the battery, not babying the battery, you can expect to have 90% of your battery life at 200,000 miles and over 80% at like 500,000 miles. But if you really baby your battery and treat it nicely, don't fast charge, don't charge it to 80%, don't deplete it down to 20%, and really try to take care of the battery, you can have a scenario where you have over 135,000 miles on your vehicle and still have about over 95% of your capacity. So almost no capacity loss.
People want to buy cars that they don't have to mollycoddle so much. It's crazy to have to go to great lengths to protect the life of a battery. We need cars where you can just charge them without thinking, without going to great lengths. Just like you put a nozzle into a an ICE car's fuel tank and just press and go. When it stops at full, you put the nozzle back on the pump. Nothing to worry about, nothing to think about. And keep in mind, while this cretin talks about averages, and you have to talk about averages if you're giving global figures, when he talks about averages, he's talking about average distance for cars to travel of about 200 miles these days. I would say that would be the average of all EVs. Just at a guess. While I'm saying the average of all internal combustion engine cars is still over 400 miles, twice as far. So that means twice as often you have to mollycoddle how you fill your battery, how you recharge it. You not only have to mollycoddle it way more than you would a petrol engine car, but you have to do it twice as often. This is no good. This is not user friendliness at all.
at that point. Now, the flip side of the argument is every once in a while there are going to be problems with the battery. There's going to be like manufacturing defects and like damage to the battery, like in accidents or things like that. This is a recent video that went kind of viral. This Hyundai Ioniq, they were quoted to be 60,000 miles to replace the battery. Now the car itself does not cost $60,000. Of course, this is Canadian dollars, so it's a little different than U.S. dollars, but still a lot of money. Um, they had some road debris hit the undersurface of the car, and it hit the battery protection plate, and it caused a dent in it. And then the dealerships claimed that the battery was dangerous and needed to be replaced totally. If you watch the whole video, probably the battery was fine. They never even opened up the battery, but the insurance paid it out. They totaled the car. They paid it out. And but the damage was pretty minor, and the dealership was probably being overly aggressive for it. This went up to corporate. Hyundai told them has offered a discount on a car to this customer, and also told the dealerships that they cannot demand replacement batteries as the repairer of choice without going up to corporate, because this battery probably was 100% fine and only the plate needed to be and then this was a similar story, except way more damage. This is a Hyundai Ioniq 5 in Indonesia. He had
That first Hyundai that made the video of $60,000, and the cretin says, oh, he just got overcharged by one person. There's a follow-up video that says that that fee was correct, pretty much correct, because they went elsewhere to see if they could get the battery cheaper.
this kind of damage, and they essentially took apart the battery pack, replaced the modules. You can see here that this module was dented here. You can see the dent right here. And they rebuilt the battery pack, and they charged him, and you can see his invoice right here, which is 122 million Indonesian rupiah. That is approximately $8,000 US. So a lot more.
$8,000 US for a partial repair is still many thousands more than what it would take for a full replacement of a petrol tank. And certainly the whole $8,000 more than a patch to a petrol tank. It's still super expensive. So where's his argument?
Reasonable for that amount of damage. And you can see this was a different Ioniq 5 battery pack. A steel crowbar went through the bottom. And, in these scenarios, these are just pretty severe scenarios. The battery was fine. It did not explode or anything like that. And they still repair them. So in other countries, they're repairing them. In Canada, they wanted to just replace the whole thing for basically cosmetic damage on the plate. So um, if the battery is not damaged, the battery will outlive the rest of the car. Okay, if the battery is damaged, like if there's a bad enough accident, yes, I mean if you have a bad enough accident, it's going to total any car, internal combustion, EV, whatnot. But one scenario that you would have to worry about is road debris that hits the undersurface on an ICE vehicle is probably just going to hit like the floor pan of the passenger compartment or some exhaust components, which are fairly easy to replace and not that expensive. But usually the batteries on most EVs are in the floor pan to keep the center of gravity low. And that distributes the weight well and makes for better handling and such. It may damage the battery, and that's true for the Aptera as well. And
No, there's more to it for the Aptera. For most fuel tanks in ICE cars, they have plates, and they can make these plates as thick as they like, but they have protective plates so that road debris is less likely to get through to puncturing the tank. They they have plastic tanks where debris merely deforms the tank momentarily and the tank is still not punctured. In either case, it's easy to have very little happen as far as road damage goes just by driving normally and having rubbish on the road. There's not a problem. It is such a minor thing. There are very rare cases of this ever happening, ever. With Aptera, it's worse than the problem with electric cars, where they are susceptible to road damage and they are so large a surface area that it's impractical to put a full size plate on it. The weight of such a plate would be so heavy, and the car itself is already a weight problem. Just having the big batteries to get half the range of a petrol car is a weight problem, a massive weight problem. They can't add weight at all. But Aptera has an additional problem. It has to skin cool through that underbelly. And the only way it can skin cool through that underbelly is to have wafer thin skin. If you put a protective plate between the road and the battery, not only are you adding weight, you are reducing the effect of skin cooling. Skin cooling doesn't even work as it is. Their prototypes are overheating and stopping. Skin cooling can't be given any protection from the road surface and all the debris that's on it. It can't be given that protection because it has to be wafer thin in the first place.
so the good thing about the Aptera is they're building it with repair in mind. Now, I suspect the battery pack itself is not user repairable. Um, I think that the modules probably need to be thermally linked to the cooling plate, so it's going to be pretty hard to replace it. But I'm hoping that Aptera will do like some trade-in of the battery pack. You can get a whole new battery pack, and they would at least repair the module, much like they did for this Ionic 5 in Indonesia, where they just took out the modules and rebuilt this module, the one that was damaged by the road debris. So anyways, I just wanted to make this video because I saw this so many times and just so much it's so misinformed that I wanted to kind of push back against it a little bit. Again, bottom line, batteries that are not damaged are going to outlive every other component of the vehicle. Okay, they're gonna last 500,000 to 1,000,000 miles, and no one drives their car that much. And even after they're used up, they can be used for stationary storage for a long time, and then finally they can be recycled. So that is kind of that is information that comes out of being misinformed. But
The cretin is the misinformer. If you take all things into consideration, and there are more things that I've even touched on, batteries are a big problem. Fuel tanks in cars are way less of a problem, and it will always be that way. EV zealots try to twist the facts, and what they really should be doing is owning the good points and then owning the bad points as well. They are conning people by playing down the negatives. And if people do that, then you can't even trust them for anything they say. I don't trust the cretin. I could take apart practically everything that he puts up on YouTube.
If they are damaged, if you go to the wrong dealership, they will ask for something ridiculous. If you go to the right dealership, they will repair it. And
If you go to any dealership, you're still up for ballpark $60,000, no matter what. If you have a fuel tank ruptured, you can go to any dealership and you might be ballpark $1,000. 60,000 versus 1,000. That's the truth. There's no getting around it.
Aptera is probably going to have a mechanism by which the battery can be repaired, and obviously the battery, you're gonna be able to buy the battery pack for what the battery pack costs, which is not going to be more than the cost of the entire vehicle. So I know that Aptera has said that they are really pro right to repair. So I'm hoping that they make the battery pack in such a way that it can be repaired, maybe not by the end user in terms of like damage like this, but that the battery pack can be replaced in whole by the user, and that maybe you can trade in your damaged.
The NMC batteries that Aptera are going to use are ones that are easily combustible when punctured. And because there is paper thin metal between the ground and the batteries, you have a much higher risk of dying in the vehicle as soon as those batteries are punctured. You should not be worried about paying $60,000 to get it repaired. You should just be worried whether you're alive to have it repaired. Well, that's all for me. I did get interrupted, but I don't think you can hear the little sounds that were made, so I'll finish this video after all the Christmas merriment that will be going on. It probably won't even get started now until Boxing Day or later. Still, that's all for me. Bye for now. Stay safe and have a Merry Christmas. Try to use your head and think. Don't be fooled by cretins who want to make money out of you. They want more referrals. They want you to invest so that he can get his cars or silly trikes. So think, make 2024 a resolution to think more logically and think deeper and protect yourself from scammers.
Battery pack, and they can repair it at the factory. All right. Well, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.